The heat didn't just shimmer, it vibrated, a low-frequency hum that Jake Miller felt in the marrow of his teeth. His 1967 Chevy Impala, a beast he'd spent 3 years restoring, was beginning to feel like a pressurized tin can. The air conditioner had died somewhere near the New Mexico border, and now, miles into the scorched heart of the Arizona desert, the interior smelled of sun-baked vinyl and his own stale sweat. Outside, the landscape was a monotonous blur of ochre sand and skeletal Joshua trees, all framed by a sky so blue it looked aggressive. 40 miles to the next town, Jake muttered, his voice cracking. He glanced at the GPS mounted on the dashboard. The blue line of his route was a straight spine across the digital map, but the icon, his little digital car, was spinning, not just drifting, but rotating in a slow, hypnotic circle. "Come on, don't do this to me now." He tapped the screen, the plastic hot enough to sting his fingertip. The device emitted a sharp digital chirp, and the screen flickered. The map dissolved into a chaotic static of green and gray lines, and then, with a final dying beep, the screen went black. Jake sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to hang in the stagnant air of the cabin. He looked at the odometer, 142,506. He'd been tracking his progress religiously since he left Tulsa, driven by a desperate need to put distance between himself and a life that had suddenly become unrecognizable. The road was supposed to be a cure, a long asphalt ribbon that would pull the knots out of his psyche. But the desert has a way of turning solitude into isolation. Up ahead, a splash of color broke the brown monotony. A neon sign, flickering weakly in the broad daylight, announced Dusty's Dino Gas. It was a classic Route 66 relic, a rusted-out station with a fiberglass Tyrannosaurus Rex standing guard near the pumps, its green paint peeling like sunburned skin. Jake checked his fuel gauge. He had half a tank, but the prospect of a cold soda and a human face was too tempting to pass up. He slowed down, the gravel crunching under his tires as he rolled past the silent dinosaur. There was no one at the pumps. The garage door was half open, revealing nothing but shadows and the silhouette of a jacked-up truck. Jake didn't stop. He felt a sudden, inexplicable prickle at the base of his neck, the primal instinct that tells a prey animal it's being watched. He pressed the accelerator, the Impala's engine roaring in protest as he rejoined the highway. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The road remained straight, a shimmering black needle piercing the horizon. Jake turned on the radio, hoping for some classic rock to drown out the silence, but all he got was a wall of white noise that sounded like crashing waves. He twisted the dial, searching for a signal, any signal. Between the static, he thought he heard a voice, a woman's voice, high and distorted, calling a name he couldn't quite catch. He turned it off. He checked the odometer again, 142,506. He blinked, leaning closer to the dashboard. The numbers hadn't moved. He tapped the glass cover, thinking the mechanism had jammed, but the dial remained frozen. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He was doing 80, the wind whipping through the open windows, the telephone poles blurring past him at a rhythmic clip. The car was moving, but the distance wasn't being recorded. Then he saw it. Up ahead, the green silhouette of a fiberglass dinosaur rose from the heat shimmer. "No," Jake whispered. "No way!" He passed Dusty's Dino Gas again. It was identical to the last time, down to the rusted-out Chevy in the garage. But as he rolled past, he noticed something new. Outside the station's small convenience store, a rocking chair was now sitting on the porch. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, and it was moving, swaying back and forth in a steady, rhythmic cadence, despite the fact that there wasn't a breath of wind in the air. Jake didn't slow down. He pushed the Impala harder, the speedometer climbing to 90, then 100. The engine screamed, a metallic wail that echoed across the empty flats. He didn't look back. He focused on the horizon, waiting for the road to curve, for a signpost to appear, for anything that indicated he was actually going somewhere. Another 10 minutes. The sun seemed to have stalled in the sky, refusing to sink lower, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The air inside the car was getting colder, a sharp, unnatural chill that defied the desert heat outside. Jake's breath began to mist in the air. He checked the odometer. 142,506. He blinked, leaning closer to the dashboard. The numbers hadn't moved. He tapped the glass cover, thinking the mechanism had jammed, but the dial remained frozen. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He was doing 80, the wind whipping through the open windows, the telephone poles blurring past him at a rhythmic clip. The car was moving, but the distance wasn't being recorded. Then he saw it. Up ahead, the green silhouette of a fiberglass dinosaur rose from the heat shimmer. "No," Jake whispered. "No way." He passed Dusty's dino gas again. It was identical to the last time, down to the rusted-out Chevy in the garage. But as he rolled past, he noticed something new. Outside the station's small convenience store, a rocking chair was now sitting on the porch. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, and it was moving, swaying back and forth in a steady, rhythmic cadence, despite the fact that there wasn't a breath of wind in the air. Jake didn't slow down. He pushed the Impala harder, the speedometer climbing to 90, then 100. The engine screamed, a metallic wail that echoed across the empty flats. He didn't look back. He focused on the horizon, waiting for the road to curve, for a signpost to appear, for anything that indicated he was actually going somewhere. Another 10 minutes. The sun seemed to have stalled in the sky, refusing to sink lower, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The air inside the car was getting colder, a sharp, unnatural chill that defied the desert heat outside. Jake's breath began to mist in the air. He checked the odometer. 142,506. He blinked, leaning closer to the dashboard. The numbers hadn't moved. He tapped the glass cover, thinking the mechanism had jammed, but the dial remained frozen. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He was doing 80, the wind whipping through the open windows, the telephone poles blurring past him at a rhythmic clip. The car was moving, but the distance wasn't being recorded. Then he saw it. Up ahead, the green silhouette of a fiberglass dinosaur rose from the heat shimmer. "No," Jake whispered. "No way." He passed Dusty's dino gas again. It was identical to the last time, down to the rusted-out Chevy in the garage. But as he rolled past, he noticed something new. Outside the station's small convenience store, a rocking chair was now sitting on the porch. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, and it was moving, swaying back and forth in a steady, rhythmic cadence, despite the fact that there wasn't a breath of wind in the air. Jake didn't slow down. He pushed the Impala harder, the speedometer climbing to 90, then 100. The engine screamed, a metallic wail that echoed across the empty flats. He didn't look back. He focused on the horizon, waiting for the road to curve, for a signpost to appear, for anything that indicated he was actually going somewhere. Another 10 minutes. The sun seemed to have stalled in the sky, refusing to sink lower, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The air inside the car was getting colder, a sharp, unnatural chill that defied the desert heat outside. Jake's breath began to mist in the air. He checked the odometer again. 142,506. He blinked, leaning closer to the dashboard. The numbers hadn't moved. He tapped the glass cover, thinking the mechanism had jammed, but the dial remained frozen. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He was doing 80, the wind whipping through the open windows, the telephone poles blurring past him at a rhythmic clip. The car was moving, but the distance wasn't being recorded. Then he saw it. Up ahead, the green silhouette of a fiberglass dinosaur rose from the heat shimmer. "No," Jake whispered. "No way!" He passed Dusty's dino gas again. It was identical to the last time, down to the rusted-out Chevy in the garage. But as he rolled past, he noticed something new. Outside the station's small convenience store, a rocking chair was now sitting on the porch.
It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, and it was moving, swaying back and forth in a steady, rhythmic cadence, despite the fact that there wasn't a breath of wind in the air. Jake didn't slow down. He pushed the Impala harder, the speedometer climbing to 90, then 100. The engine screamed, a metallic wail that echoed across the empty flats. He didn't look back. He focused on the horizon, waiting for the road to curve, for a signpost to appear, for anything that indicated he was actually going somewhere. Another 10 minutes. The sun seemed to have stalled in the sky, refusing to sink lower, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The air inside the car was getting colder, a sharp, unnatural chill that defied the desert heat outside. Jake's breath began to mist in the air. He checked the odometer, 142,506. And then, like a recurring nightmare, the green dinosaur appeared again. This time, Jake slammed on the brakes. The Impala skidded, tires screaming against the asphalt, leaving thick black streaks behind him. He came to a halt 50 yards before the gas station. He sat there, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his chest heaving. "This isn't real," he told himself. "It's the heat, exhaustion, dehydration." He looked toward the station. The rocking chair was still there, but it was empty. However, the front door of the store was now wide open. Propped against the doorframe was a man. He was wearing an oil-stained jumpsuit, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the road, facing Jake. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached for his phone, but the screen was just as dead as the GPS. He looked at the gas station, then back at the road he'd just traveled. There was no one behind him, no other cars, no dust clouds, nothing but the empty, shimmering highway. He put the car in reverse, intending to turn around and drive back the way he came. He backed up, the engine growling, but when he looked in his rearview mirror, the road behind him didn't look like Route 66 anymore. It was a jagged, fractured landscape of broken asphalt and deep fissures, as if the earth had been torn apart by some colossal force. The sky back there was a bruised, sickly purple, and the sun was nowhere to be seen. He slammed the car back into drive. There was only one way to go. As he slowly crawled past Dusty's dino gas for the third time, he kept his eyes locked on the man in the jumpsuit. As the Impala drew level with the porch, the man slowly raised a hand. He wasn't waving, he was pointing. His long, skeletal finger was directed straight at Jake's passenger seat. Jake looked over. The seat was empty, just as it had been since he left Tulsa. But as he looked back at the road, he felt a weight settle into the cushion beside him. The springs creaked, the fabric depressed, as if someone invisible and impossibly heavy, had just sat down. "Keep driving, Jake," a voice whispered. It wasn't coming from the radio. It wasn't coming from the man on the porch. It was coming from right next to him, a dry, papery sound that smelled of old dust and ozone. "We're almost there." Jake's foot hit the gas. He didn't look at the passenger seat. He didn't look at the dinosaur. He just drove, his eyes wide and stinging as the odometer clicked over for the first time in an hour. 142,505. It wasn't counting up. It was counting down.
And as the numbers rolled backward, the desert around him began to change. The sand started to turn gray like ash, and the Joshua trees twisted into shapes that defied the laws of biology. The road ahead wasn't just a loop, it was a descent, and Jake Miller, with a ghost for a passenger and a dying world in his rearview mirror, was just beginning to realize that on Route 66, the destination isn't a place, it's an end. "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" Jake's voice cracked, a jagged sound in the stifling cabin. He slammed his palm against the dashboard, but the GPS remained a glowing rectangle of static, a white noise eye staring back at him from the center of his world. The Impala's engine roared, a guttural protest against the heat, yet the scenery remained a mocking repetition. The same crooked telephone pole, the same bleached cattle skull, and now, appearing through the heat haze like a bruise on the horizon, the Rust and Bone gas station. Again. He didn't slow down this time. He floored it. The needle climbed, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour. The desert should have been a blur, a streak of ochre and gray, but it felt stationary, as if the car were a treadmill grinding against a world that refused to move. He looked to his right, to the passenger seat where the ghost sat. It wasn't a spirit, not exactly. It was the memory of his brother, Leo, manifested in the heavy, cold weight that pressed down on the leather upholstery. It was the silence Leo left behind after the accident, a silence that had now taken on a physical, suffocating presence. "We passed it 3 times, Leo. 3 times in 20 minutes, Jake whispered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The odometer clicked over, but the numbers were wrong. They weren't counting miles. They were symbols, archaic, swirling glyphs that flickered beneath the glass. Then, the engine sputtered, a rhythmic metallic coughing that vibrated through Jake's boots. The Impala, his indestructible beast, was dying. It died exactly where it had to, 20 yards from the Rust and Bone pumps. Jake coasted to a halt, the silence that followed the engine's death more deafening than the roar. He sat there, chest heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. Outside, the Arizona sun felt different. It was a pale, sickly yellow, casting shadows that stretched in directions that defied the overhead position of the orb. He had to know. He grabbed the heavy iron tire iron from the floorboard, a cold comfort in his trembling hand, and pushed the door open. The air didn't smell like dry sage anymore. It smelled like ozone and old, wet pennies. "Stay in the car," he muttered to the empty seat, half expecting Leo to answer. He walked toward the station. It was a relic of the 50s, a crumbling limestone box with 2 rusted pumps standing like sentinels. But this time, something was different. In his previous passes, the windows were boarded up. Now they were clear, reflecting the desert behind him. But the reflection was wrong. In the glass, the road was gone. There was only an endless field of black, upright stones. He reached the first pump. He looked down at the concrete. There, near his feet, was a crumpled soda can. He recognized the dent he'd made in it when he'd thrown it out the window during the first loop. He picked it up. The aluminum was pitted with decades of rust, the label faded to a ghostly white. It had been 10 minutes since he threw it, but the object had aged 50 years. "What is this?" he breathed. He turned to the station's door. A bell chimed as he pushed it open, a bright, cheerful sound that felt like a needle to his nerves. Inside, the shelves were packed with rows of identical jars. No labels, just a thick amber liquid with something dark and multi-legged suspended in the center. At the counter stood a figure. It was a man, or the suggestion of one, wearing a grease-stained jumpsuit. His face was obscured by the brim of a trucker hat, but his hands, they were moving with frantic, unnatural speed, sorting a pile of teeth on the counter. Small teeth, large teeth, some that looked suspiciously human. "Lost?" the man asked. His voice didn't come from his throat. It vibrated out of the walls, a low-frequency hum that made Jake's teeth ache. "I'm looking for the way to Kingman. The road. It keeps coming back here." The man stopped sorting. He looked up, and Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Where eyes should have been, there were only smooth patches of skin, stretched tight over bone. "The road doesn't go to Kingman anymore, Jake. The road goes inward." Jake backed away, his heel catching on a floorboard. "How do you know my name?" "We know all the names of the ones who try to outrun the coil." He picked up a large molar and held it out. "This you dropped about 4 miles back, or was it 4 years? Time is a bit elastic here." Jake felt his jaw with his tongue. His back left molar was gone, a gap where there had been solid bone seconds ago. There was no blood, only a hollow numbness.
Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through his shock. He turned and ran. He burst through the door, the bell chiming its mocking tune, and scrambled back to the Impala. He dived into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine groaned, a dying animal's whimper, but it didn't catch. He looked in the rearview mirror. The man from the station was standing on the porch. He wasn't chasing. He was just standing there, holding the tooth. "Come on, come on!" Jake screamed at the car. He pumped the gas. The smell of gasoline filled the cabin, but it was mixed with something else, the smell of the ghost in the passenger seat. The cold weight was shifting. The indentation in the leather was deepening, as if someone very heavy and very angry was leaning toward him. He looked at the passenger seat. There was nothing visible, but the air was shimmering, distorting like a heat haze. A hand-shaped print appeared on the dashboard, the plastic deforming under invisible pressure. Then the Impala's engine roared to life with a violence that shook the frame. Jake didn't hesitate. He slammed it into gear and floored it, the tires screaming as they tore out of the gravel lot. He didn't look back. He kept his eyes glued to the asphalt. But as he reached the crest of the next hill, his heart plummeted. The rust and bone station was already there, waiting at the bottom of the slope. But this time, the man wasn't alone. There were dozens of them. They were standing in the middle of the road, a line of faceless figures in grease-stained jumpsuits, their hands held out as if waiting to catch something. Jake checked his GPS one last time. The static had cleared. In its place was a single glowing line that looped back on itself, forming a perfect golden infinity symbol. And in the center of the loop, a small red dot. "You are here." He realized then that he wasn't driving on a road. He was driving on a record, a groove carved into the skin of the world, and the needle was beginning to dig deep. The ghost in the seat next to him finally spoke. It wasn't Leo's voice. It was a composite of 1,000 voices, a choir of the lost. "Drive faster, Jake. We're almost at the part where it repeats." He looked at the speedometer. It was spinning clockwise, past 120, past the limits of the dial, and the world outside began to fray. The desert sand started to turn into ash, blowing away to reveal a substructure of rusted iron and clockwork gears beneath the earth. The sky wasn't blue or yellow anymore. It was the color of a fresh bruise, purple and black, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light. He had been investigating the loop, trying to find the exit. Now he understood. The loop wasn't a trap designed to keep him in. It was a digestive tract, and he was being moved deeper into the gut of something that didn't know how to die. He didn't hit the brakes when he reached the line of men. He couldn't. His feet were no longer his own. They were fused to the pedals, the metal skin of the Impala beginning to merge with his own flesh. The car wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was an exoskeleton, and they were both being rewritten by the geometry of Route 66. As he tore through the first line of figures, they didn't break. They dissolved into clouds of moths that clogged his intake, their wings beating against the windshield like 1,000 tiny hearts. "The destination isn't a place, Jake," the choir in the passenger seat whispered, its form finally becoming visible.
a translucent, multi-limbed thing made of recycled memories. We're almost at the part where it repeats. The Rust and Bone station loomed again, but this time the building was organic, the walls pulsing like a lung. Jake Miller, or the thing that was becoming Jake Miller, gripped the wheel and steered directly into the open maw of the garage bay. The road wasn't just a loop, it was a throat. The Impala didn't just roll into the garage, it was swallowed. As the front tires crossed the threshold, the grinding roar of the pavement vanished, replaced by a wet, rhythmic squelch. Jake slammed on the brakes, but the pedal felt like it was sinking into warm dough. The car groaned, its metal frame creaking not with mechanical stress, but with the sound of bone shifting against muscle.